I think we're all ready to get started. Welcome to the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority meeting of September 15, 2015. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We take roll. Oh, does he? Okay.
Roll call?
Sure, let's go ahead and have roll call. Would you please do the roll call?
Commissioner McClure. Here. Chairman Hawley.
Here?
Commissioner Gastineau.
Here. Okay, thank you. And Dr. Glore could not be here tonight, and Mr. Gitlin has resigned the commission, and the Board of Supervisors has not yet made an appointment. So there's just the three of us today, but it does constitute a quorum, and so we'll move forward. So thank you again for being here. The first matter is public comments. Any member of the public may address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter on or off the agenda. After receiving recognition from myself, please give your name and address for the record. Probably sufficient if you just say city or county residency. It's okay. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. So is there any public comment this afternoon? Yes.
Good afternoon, Elizabeth Henry from the county. And what a relief to be speaking about something positive today. And I didn't bring my hordes either. As the letter writer replied, I had hordes, control of millions, but anyway. So now there's time, I think, and it reminded me of something I think I spoke to you about or spoke at the Board of Supervisors about a year ago. And that's one of the recycling programs that the state is implementing, and that's mattress recycling. And it's due to launch in 2016. That's just a few months away. And, it's something that if we'd had the services of both a director and a program manager, one or both of them would have been working at the state level on the advisory committee and other committees to help structure the program, and so it would serve rural needs also. I was happy to read some of the minutes of an advisory committee that it's mostly large counties or cities and a lot of people from the industry, but they are concerned about rural areas being able to participate in this program. So I'd like to see us do it, but I think we have to do it. So I think there's a lot to do, and I would like to see us get started. They've already implemented the fee. You're going to be paying $11 for a new mattress, $11 for a box spring. It's going to be collected. There's Mattress Recycling Council. In fact, they're in front of the Cal Recycle in Sacramento today, presenting another report. They're finishing up on the details, so it's really going to happen. And but we need to figure out in this level, how is it going to work? And the carpet recycling worked out in paint because we had people involved, and I hope that our director now will have an opportunity to be part of these discussions and make sure that rural counties get their due in these new programs. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Any other public comment this afternoon? Okay, seeing no other public comment, we'll go ahead and move on to our open session items. Before I do that, though, we do have a couple of urgency items that we're going to be adding, or I would suggest we add, to the discussion action items.
I could explain that.
Would you please?
Yes.
That'd be great.
So we received a letter from the State Water Resources Control Board. As you may recall, we made a partial payment on a $70,000 fee for the waste discharge requirements associated with the Crescent City landfill. As we are appealing those waste discharge requirements fees, however, we did receive a letter from the State Water Resources Control Board saying that if we did not pay this amount in full by a date in October, that they would be referring it to a collections agency. This arose subsequent to the posting of the agenda, so I would like to recommend that we add 2 items to this agenda. One is discussion and possible approval of a budget transfer for fiscal year 14-15 in the amount of $11,270. And the second item is to approve payment of the unpaid balance of the waste discharge requirements fees to the State Water Resources Control Board in the amount of $40,156. So if both of those are put onto this agenda, then that will enable us to discuss and possibly pay this outstanding balance and not be referred to a collection agency.
Thank you. And I would suggest we make the discussion regarding the budget transfer 2.2, and 2.3 would be the approval of the payment to the State Water Resources Control Board. As a matter of procedure, should we vote on whether or not, yes?
I move that we add these two items as a state of urgency to the agenda.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded to approve adding these items as an urgency. Any other discussion? I think probably we'll just poll the vote just throughout, okay? Please?
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Chairman Hawley?
Yes. Okay, thank you. Those will be added. So, prior to getting to that, we do have a consent agenda. The first matter is to approve the minutes of the regular session from Tuesday, August 18, 2015. Approval of a budget transfer for fiscal year 14-15 in the amount of $202. Approval of a budget transfer for fiscal year 15-16 in the amount of $15,000. That's all we have today on our consent agenda, I believe.
Yes, and I would like to just let you all know that the $15,000 is adding to the budget. That's the beverage container recycling grants that the state has approved our implementation of, and so we're adding that as an additional to the budget.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on the consent agenda? Any public comment on the consent agenda? Public comment on the consent agenda only? Okay, we'll bring it back to the commission.
I move that we approve the consent agenda, 3 items.
Okay, thank you.
My second, but I do, never mind. I thought I put in an extra zero on one of the budget transfers.
Okay, well, we'll stay with the
Hey, that
single-
only happens in the newspaper.
Yeah, we noticed that recently.
Well, I'm looking and going, wait, this is $202. That was,
Okay, very good. So we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as a whole. Would you please poll the vote on those matters?
Chairman Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The consent agenda has been approved. The first matter under discussion and action items, landfill post-closure, 2.1, discussion and possible action regarding releasing a request for proposals for aerial surveying services for the Crescent City landfill. Mr. Ward.
Under Regional Water Quality Control Board Order 9790, the authority is required to do an aerial survey of the Crescent City landfill every 5 years. Last one was done in 2011 for a quantity of about $3,300. And so we're looking for authorization to release this request for proposals with response deadline of November 3rd so that the board may make a selection at the November meeting.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Ward on the aerial survey? Any public comment on this matter? Okay, very good. Back to the commission itself. Any further discussion?
Where are we going to advertise?
There are not very many companies that are capable of doing this. I'm aware of 2. And I have asked the county as to who they've recently used for aerial surveys. They will be on the list, and then Richard B. Davis, a local company, will also be on the list.
But are we still required to post it?
Yeah, we'll advertise that it's available.
Okay, thank you.
I move that we release the RFP for the aerial surveying services for the Crescent City landfill for 2015.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to release the request for proposals for aerial surveying. Any further discussion?
I'm glad we're doing it.
Yeah, me too. So would you please poll the vote on this?
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Chairman Hawley?
Yes. Okay, thank you. So, again, we had 2 matters that we placed on as urgency matters. The first one being 2.2 is discussion and possible approval of a budget transfer for fiscal year 14-15 in the amount of $11,270. Mr. Ward?
So these two items, of course, are very much interrelated. The first budget transfer, the reason why that's necessary is that the full amount of the state fees at the time that we set last year's budget was not known. And then when we had the final full amount of the fees, at that point, the board's policy was not to pay it. So we didn't make the budget transfer into that amount. So the budget transfer is necessary to make sure there's enough money in that budget line so that we can pay this amount. And then the second item is, of course, payment.
Okay. Thank you. Any technical questions of Mr. Ward? Okay, is there any public comment on regarding the budget transfer itself of $11,270? Okay, seeing no public comment, we'll bring it back to the commission.
I'll move that we do the budget transfer of $11,207 to help offset our payment to the Water Quality Board.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the budget transfer. Any further discussion?
I just
Yes.
want to weigh in and say that this is a wise move, because if we want a favorable outcome for our appeal, we definitely need to be doing things in order and not making the Regional Water Control Board or the State Water Control Board, we don't want to make them a little flustered. So this will help.
It's always better not to go to collections if we can help it. Okay, so we do have a motion and a second. Would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Chairman Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Okay, very good. It's unanimous. So we didn't address 2.3 yet, did we?
Not yet, no.
Okay, that's the approval of the payment itself of the unpaid balance of the waste discharge requirement fees to the State Water Resources Control Board in the amount of $40,156. So, Mr. Ward, do you have anything to add from what you've already said?
I suggest that we pay this amount.
Okay, I thought you might. So any technical questions of Mr. Ward any further? Okay, any public comment on the payment of the discharge fees? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring this back again.
I move that we approve the payment of discharge fees.
I second.
$40,156.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded that we pay the waste discharge requirement fees. Please poll the vote again.
Chairman Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for entertaining that emergency action. Under the collections franchise, 3.1, discussion and possible action regarding collections change order 7 with Recology Del Norte establishing overweight limits for bins with a volume of 6 cubic yards or less. Mr. Ward.
I'd like to invite Jeremy Herber of Recology to explain the problem that this change order is attempting to address.
Manager for Recology.
Thank you.
Pretty much we're having an issue with our 2 to 6 yard bins. What's happening is there's never been a weight limit established for those containers. So there's been a loophole for various individuals to exceed the weight limit on these containers, which is putting them past their safety standard. And it's also getting so heavy that it's starting to damage our trucks. We're having blown tires, leaking hydraulic seals. And my biggest concern is we exceed these weight limits. If the bottom drops out of this tub during transport and it goes all over the highway, we could have a bad accident. So I've been working with Mr. Ward to establish through the manufacturer some safe limits of weight for these containers, and we'd like to put that in the record for the contract to make sure that if we have some rights to refuse loads that have exceeded these weight limits, to make sure we keep the safety up for everyone.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like a good idea to me, but any questions?
Yeah, do you guys have a way to weigh them when the trucks pick them up, or you just know that they're just...
Well, pretty much, we normally don't weigh those. We usually transport them back to the yard, a big truck comes in, but the trucks usually have the capacity to lift those up, almost double the capacity of what the bin should be able to hold. And there's been many times where we go to pick these up, the front tires of the truck come off the ground, and we just can't move it. So we're not really going to be a stickler of being a few pounds over, but, you know, these guys, they move hundreds of these things a week, and they know when they're extremely full. Really, if we feel we can transport it safely, we're going to try to do such. Certain materials, though, exceed it very far, like roofing materials. They get a 6-yard bin, and even to fill a 6-yard bin up a little over 50% is about double the capacity. I mean, it's just really heavy for these containers, and it's starting to buckle them. And so that's my biggest concern. So we're not going to really try to, you know, if they're really overweight, and then we're going to try to get them to be unloaded, or if they're just really something we can transport safely. If we feel it's extremely heavy, we might take it over to the transfer station and get a weight ticket on that to be able to charge the difference. But we're not going to worry about a few pounds. We're really just going after the ones that are just grossly excessive.
Right, and the reason I'm asking is that to have a standard that protects you guys, you know, from anything that happens in transit, so that you can refuse somebody without having a problem with it. You know, like,
Correct.
hey, you let this guy do it, and, you know, I heard from here, and it's like,
Yeah, and right now, there's no way for me to, if I refuse something, I don't have a reason, because we don't have an establishment of standard. So we're trying to set that standard now in order for us to try to have something to base our judgments off of that's agreed upon everybody.
and then my next question is are the bins marked with, you know, what kind of capacity they are, or how much they can do, or, you know, like you have a line, hey, don't fill it up farther than this with this type of material, just to make it, you know, to the consumer.
Right.
That they know exactly where it is, and you can always point to it, you know, of course, I have to do this with my kids, you know, here's the rule.
Right.
And this is that you exceeded it, so I can refuse it, and you guys have to unload it like you guys have here. in the
Correct.
thing.
Mr. Ward and myself, we worked on a letter. So when a customer comes in to rent a unit from between 2 and 6 yards, whatever size they choose to rent, there's actually going to be like a small questionnaire. And if there's certain materials they're going to be using, it's up to us to educate them, to let them know that when you're doing this material, we can't go above this line. If it's just a regular trash material, which those are built for, they can fill them up as full as they want. But certain materials, it's going to be, you know, asphalt, drywall material, dirt, rocks. We've seen boulders in these things. Those types of materials, we're going to educate my staff to ask those questions during the rental process. And if any of those come back as yes, we're doing that material, then you probably can only go so far, or we need to put you in the right correct bin for transport. So that's going to be kind of taken care of at our office during the rental process of education.
That's a good idea. Yeah, and also I would suggest put it on the bins, because you know the people that come in and rent it, boss guy, and then the rest of them are just like, hey, we just got to get rid of this stuff and let's throw it in there.
Yeah,
So-
and I'll look into probably doing that. And if we really have a problem with the weight issue, we'll also be able to go over, actually get a weight ticket for that, so we can have an intelligent conversation with the customer, letting them know that, hey, this is the actual weight ticket of the scale, and according to, and, you know, and we have the weights established on the rental agreement. So it says for this size container, you're allowed this maximum weight as established by the authority. And so then if there's a difference above that, then we can have that conversation.
I too like the idea of making sure it's on the bin
Okay?
and making sure that there's a limit line. So if I'm the roofer that's been hired that morning, my boss can tell me, see that line? That's just where it goes.
Okay, we can try to shoot for that. We'll have to figure out, we'll almost have to load one up kind of to figure out where that line really is. I mean, really the way these bins are originally designed is not for that material.
Right.
I mean, a 10-yard bin is designed for heavy materials, dirt, rock, shingles. The reason why they're using these bins is because there hasn't been a weight limit established, and they've been putting 4 or 5 ton in a 6-yard container that's designed for under a ton. And so that's been the loophole that we're trying to close. So really, by the time they rent 5 of these 6-yarders at that lower line, it would have been cheaper to rent the 10. So that's what we're trying to, and it's a safer way of transporting. So we're trying to close that little gap right there. So I think after a small period of time, these rentals were going to decease on these smaller containers and move to the appropriate containers for that type of transport anyway.
And do any of Recology's sister companies do with this kind of limit, a weight limit? Are they
No,
determined?
majority of the other, and I did some research on this too, majority of the other companies don't even allow this material in these containers.
Oh, okay.
That's, and the manufacturer really doesn't suggest it, but at this point in time, since it hasn't been established quite some time ago, people are kind of accustomed to using these, so now we're going to try to limit it with a little bit of verbiage and some education, and hopefully start to decrease that usage for that purpose. You can use it to a certain amount, but not to the limits they're using. So we're hoping to encourage them to use the appropriate container for that type of transport. So we're hoping, you know, by the time we get these things all measured out, we're hoping that this problem is going to go away within a few months anyway.
Thank you.
For the board's information, your board packet includes the questionnaire that Recology developed. And that's not part of the change order. That's just communication to let you all know how this communication with the customers of Recology is going to go. And I'd be happy to work with Jeremy to develop a sticker for the bins if you think that's the best way to, if that's a good way to communicate with your customers.
Yeah, we can, you know, we got quite a few hundred bins, and this is not a huge problem at this point in time. It's maybe a 10 or 15% of the rentals, and I would imagine it should limit fairly quickly as these rentals continue and we start kind of closing the gap. So we could probably maybe set some aside for people that want for that purpose, and then we can kind of give our best judgment of where that line limit needs to be, and we can try to figure out a happy medium on that.
Okay, thank you. And I will say it's a thorough agreement. There should be no questions about what it is
Correct.
that's expected.
Whoever
So thank
reads
you.
their rental agreement.
Yeah, well, that's when you rent cars.
Nobody
though.
reads those, yeah.
Only when you bring it back. and-
Yeah, and
That's when they
So-
ding you.
okay. Thank you.
All
sir.
right, thanks.
We do, if, I would recommend that the board approve the change order 7, which is in your board packet without the label for collections change
Well-
order 7, sorry about that.
Before we go to public comment, does it reflect change order 7, the number 7 somewhere?
Well, unfortunately, as Catherine was pointing out to me as we were preparing for the meeting, unfortunately, the version that I put in the agenda did not have
Okay.
collections change order 7, but the one you'll be signing does.
Okay, good. I was just looking for it.
Also, I'd like to add that it's been a good working relationship with Recology to try to solve this problem, and I think we've come to a good resolution. Unlike the rate ordinance, which you'll be considering later at this meeting, this one could be effective starting October 1st because it doesn't change any of the rates. It clarifies the interpretation about how the rates are applied, but the rates are the same as those have already been adopted.
You know, I will say the visual of lifting a load and then having the truck actually be lifted instead of the load kind of put it into perspective for me. So is there any public comment on this before we take action? Any public comment? Okay, so it's before us.
So I move that we approve change order 7 for Recology Del Norte establishing an overweight limit for bins with a volume of 6 cubic block yards or less.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. It's been moved and seconded to approve change order number 7. Would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner McClure? Yes. Chairman Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, the next matter before us. Okay, we have no transfer station items, other general solid waste authority matters. 5.1, discussion and possible action regarding approval of use of authority allocated bin pools for the Del Norte County Fair, beach cleanup, and sea cruise. Mr. Ward.
So I drafted this report based on a letter we'd received from the Chamber of Commerce requesting 3 bins for sea cruise. In addition, there's the beach cleanup, which Lori Poole of Recology has successfully coordinated with the school district, and there is a memo attached to your staff report from Lori Poole basically saying that Ross Morgan from Smith River School has stepped up and is helping to organize this year's beach cleanup. So much appreciated. There are a number of other community groups involved with this, including the New Dawn Support Group, Mike Tice's Crescent City Cleanup Crew, and Hambro WSG. So we certainly appreciate all of those contributions. But what you're being asked to approve today is the allocation of 3 authority-allocated bins to the Delaware County Fair after the fact. We intended to put that before you before the fair, but unfortunately that didn't happen. The Household Hazardous Waste event uses one of these bins for disposing of empty paint containers that are bulked during the day of the event. We have 5 for the beach cleanups, even though there are going to be 9 beach cleanup sites. They're using 5 bins because they'll be shuttling some materials from those other sites to the bins. And then we have a request for 3 for the Sea Cruise, but Jeff Palmer of the Chamber is here, and he'd like to clarify that request.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, Chair Holly. I'm Jeff Palmer. I'm a resident of the county, but I'm here as the Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce to talk about Sea Cruise. Now, I believe in the letter that we sent, which you probably have in your packet, we requested 2 bins for the Sea Cruise show, because generally that's what we have done in the past. Generally, there's one, a large 20-yard on Front Street, and then a smaller 6-yard, I believe it is, on Stamps Way.
Well, thank you for that clarification. The letter actually doesn't say the number of dumpsters, but since I already put in the staff report, we were suggesting 3, we're all good.
Okay, because, yeah, when I spoke with you on the phone, I'm not sure if you're aware of our new event this year. Instead of having a 50s, 60s dance out at the fairgrounds, we're going to have a closed sanctioned cruise downtown, and we're going to utilize the Tsunami Memorial Fountain area to have a festival, and it's Blues, Brews, and Cruise. So we're going to have live blues music and micro brews and food vendors. So we realized we need another bin to be able to clean up the refuse from that event. So, so that's why we're requesting the 3 bins.
Just one big one and then 2 6s, or
Mm-hmm.
is that what they are?
Yeah, one large one. We probably would even just need a 4 cubic yard for the Blues, Brews, and Cruise.
The other possibility is, of course, getting the paired bins of the disposal carts and the recycling carts, if you think there's going to be a good number of beverage containers available for recycling.
Yeah, we usually pick up the recycle containers from the fairgrounds for the Sea Cruise show itself, and then we could move those over to the plaza area.
Great.
Okay, well, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, and it's going to be a good event this year.
Sounds like fun.
I'll be there.
Yeah, I thought you might. Okay. I appreciate, too, you're providing the criteria and policy for the allocation of authority-directed complementary bin pools. I don't know if Ms. McClure has had a chance to look at that yet, but we did that just a year ago, so that's good to have. So,
I do have a question about the beach cleanup. They only want 3-yard bins on those. And I know that when we do a bin pull, it can be as large as a 20. And I was wondering if they can consolidate their areas, and get larger bins, and that way would save us some bin pulls for something else in the future.
I really appreciate that suggestion, and I'm working with Lori Poole along those lines, and that's how we were able to pull it from 9 down to 5.
Right.
At a certain point, the travel distance is large enough but I will work with Lori along those lines.
All right, yeah, that's the only thing I had.
okay. Is there any public comment on the authorization of bin pools? Okay, seeing none?
So if the board approves this action, you will have 4 remaining bin pulls for the remainder of the calendar year.
Good. Very good. And so we just have the one modification of the Sea Cruise being 2 instead of 3, it looks like.
It is
Still 3?
It is as it's written.
Okay.
We're looking for 3 bin approvals, and that's what they've requested.
Very good. Okay, it's before us.
I move that we approve the bin request.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded to approve the requested bin pulls. Any further discussion?
We had public comment, right?
We did?
All right,
sorry. Okay, no, I appreciate you taking care of me. Go ahead and poll the vote, please.
Chairman Hawley,
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau,
Yes.
Commissioner McClure.
Okay, thank you. Boy, the vote goes quick with just 3 of us, doesn't it?
But you know, I have total ability to stop it.
Yeah, don't let it go to your head. Okay, 5.2, discussion and possible action regarding changes to the authority staffing chart, including the elimination of the program manager position, the creation of a new position for a facilities and programs coordinator, and modifications to the job descriptions for the administrative assistant, solid waste, and the account clerk, solid waste. Mr. Ward.
So I have a PowerPoint to sort of take you through these staff changes and why we're recommending what we are. So this is what the staffing chart looked like prior to Mr. Hendrick's retirement. You can see that's essentially full staffing at the time in fiscal year 12-13. Next slide, please. So at the start of this year, this is what the staffing chart looked like. You can see we have a vacant director. I was juggling as acting director and program manager, and you can see the contractors that we have on the left. And we had a vacant account clerk position as I had promoted Lisa Babcock to be administrative assistant, and she had been account clerk. So then that left us with a vacant account clerk position. Next slide. We then moved Catherine Brewer to be the account clerk as she had been helping us, and we did have a competitive process, so we had a number of applicants, but she was selected. And so that left us with a vacancy under refuse site attendants as we were entering the summer months. Next slide, please. So we hired 2 additional refuse site attendants and in May 2015. Next slide, please. So then in June 2015, I was hired as director, and Ms. Brewer began serving as recording secretary. So you can see that change. We still had a vacant program manager position. Next slide, please. Now in this slide, I've dropped the listing of the contractors. They still are our contractors, but it began to get a little complicated, so I thought I would focus things by dropping that. So this chart doesn't show the authority's contractors, facilities, or programs, but they do include, of course, management of the Crescent City landfill, the Delaware County Transfer Station, the Klamath Transfer Station, the Gasky Transfer Station. We have grant programs for the oil payment program as well as beverage containers. And of course, we have our household hazardous waste event, which I'll be talking about further, as well as SHARPS programs and a variety of other programs and compliance issues. But those are all the responsibilities of myself and the program manager. The people on the right side of that staffing chart are responsible primarily for the transfer station's gate and the accounting that follows. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed organizational chart. I've had meetings with the Solid Waste Management Authority union representatives and discussed these changes and changes to the job descriptions, which are included in your packet. And essentially, I'm proposing that we eliminate the program manager position and establish a facilities and programs coordinator position, which has fewer duties and areas of responsibility and expertise than the program manager. But with myself as director, I think that the board will be served well with that position. In addition, there are slight modifications to the job descriptions for the administrative assistant, which is now administrative assistant - solid waste, and the account clerk - solid waste. The reason why those job titles have changed also is that we were starting to depart from the standard activities and job classifications that the county was using. Specifically, for example, Catherine Brewer is now serving as a clerk of the board as well as account clerk, and that's a dual functionality that doesn't exist in the county at all, for example. Similarly, the administrative assistant has more responsibilities for personnel management than would be typical of administrative assistant under the county. So both of those are slightly elevated, and the facilities and programs coordinator compared to the program manager is a slightly a step down. That is a little bit of a concern in that I believe the people who would be most qualified to do this are probably going to be moving from outside the area to Del Norte County. And, of course, salary is something that they look at as one of the enticements to move here. So that's part of the realities that we're facing. But that is the recommendation. I Unfortunately, in the board packet, I didn't include the job description of the program manager, but I did pass that out, and there are copies available there for the public. So with that, the staff recommendation is that the board approve changing the authority's administrative assistant 1, which is a range 40, to administrative assistant solid waste, which is a range 44, with the attached job description. 2, that the board approve changing the authority's account clerk 2, which is a range 24, to account clerk dash solid waste, which is range 28, with the attached job description. 3, that the board eliminate the authority's program manager, range 55, effective today. 4, that the board establish the authority facilities and programs coordinator, range 50 position, effective today, according to the job description. 5, that the board approve the attached proposed organizational chart with respect to these positions. That's the one that's on the screen before you now. And 6, that the board direct staff to work with the Delaware County Personnel Department to begin recruiting for this position as soon as practical. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions of Mr. Ward? I just had a couple. One is, when we talk about the ranges, are they equal percentages between each range? So,
No, they aren't.
okay,
Generally, between steps, there's about 5%, but the ranges are not,
over time, they've gotten kind of,
24 to 28 is not the same as 50 to 54, for example.
Okay.
There's different salary breaks between those two. But I did do an analysis, and considering those 3 positions, the administrative assistant, the account clerk, and the program manager, compared to the administrative assistant, solid waste, account clerk, solid waste, and facilities and programs coordinator position, there's a net reduction in staffing costs.
very good, that helps, thank you. The one thing that I did like reading was that you have built-in redundancy in each of the positions. You know when someone's gone, who it is that will be able to pick up, and the cross-training will occur.
That's been
In order to
really
do that.
important. And I credit both Lisa and Catherine especially for really making that work inside the office. And that's part of the reason why I'm very strongly recommending that their job ranges as well as their job descriptions be modified, because there's no doubt that the last couple of years have been challenging for all of the authority staff. And a lot of that has fallen on the people who have been working in the office. So I really appreciate their fortitude through these challenging times.
And when an employee moves to a different range, do you know how that works? Do they move to the range that's nearest what they were making before? Do you know?
I'm not sure of the question.
Well, if you were on a range and you're making a certain amount of money, and the next range you would be going up to is exponentially more, 20% more. The person doesn't move to the range and make 20% more, do they? They go to the step on the range that gives them a raise, but not necessarily laterally.
The range is tied to the job description. So, and then according to the union agreement, that describes how the raises go. For instance, once you're above, I think 15 years experience, then you're at the top of the range, and it's already clarified that your next step is the step beyond that, and it's a 5% increase. So even though the ranges may go to F, for example, your next step will be at G, even though there isn't a listing of what G is. G is your range, your last pay at 105%.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I just, sometimes when what's effectively a reorganization occurs, people can do very, very well if they go laterally to where they were. If they were on a step F, and they go to a step F that's 4 or 5 ranges higher, it's an inordinate increase.
And that doesn't, for example, back when Catherine went from a refuse site attendant to an account clerk, at that point, she changed the range because she's in a different job description.
Right.
So it's a different range. And then she's within that range as long as she's in that new position.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a couple comments and a question. Of course, I've always been like, hire the director and let them run the house. That's the way it should be, and I appreciate you doing all this work to get your house in order there, Ted. The facilities and programs coordinator, it has less requirements than the program manager, so we're hoping that we can get that filled here quicker than we would trying to find a program manager.
We certainly hope so.
That's my biggest thing right there. It's like, let's get you fully staffed and get going.
Thank you, sir.
I just had, I'm trying to find it because I should have pulled it up beforehand on the county salary schedules. But when we fly this job description, I think that you can do the salary range is 50, but in parentheses, I think you can actually put the entire range. Because historically in Delaware County, if we are hiring someone that their qualifications are such, we sometimes put them on level C as opposed to entry level A. And I think that that would help with the application process if someone could see the breadth of the range and have it actually on there.
I can work with Joey and try to make sure that the announcement gives the full range.
Yeah, based on education and experience or something.
Mm-hmm.
Good, good. Okay. anything
Yeehaw, when's it going out?
As soon as I can get it out the door.
Okay, tomorrow.
You've got to finish up the meeting.
I'm very eager.
Emailing it as we speak.
I'm sending now.
Good thing we have internet.
We'll wait for the vote.
Any other questions of Mr. Ward? Any public comment on the reorganization of our staff? Yes.
Elizabeth Henry, County. I just have to say thank you. I know you're going to approve this. Don't prove me wrong.
She's looking at you.
So, and to Ted Ward for all the work he did in keeping the ship afloat and preparing for this next move. It's just such a regret, the 2+ years that have been wasted, and the many things that the authority has fallen behind in because of this very step. So I really appreciate what you're doing. And I forgot to say when I was talking about like the mattress recycling, I mean, I would like to see that kind of program put on the staff's agenda right away. I mean, I think it needs to, and I would appreciate a referral from you, or however you do that, to make sure that's being taken care of. And I don't feel guilty about it, because now there will be people to do it, and that's so much appreciated. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other public comment on the reorganization? Okay, seeing no other public comment on the reorganization, there are about 6 steps that are suggested by Mr. Ward.
Do we have to vote on each step?
You can say the vote to, I move
First
staff
steps.
recommendation would be fine.
All right. I move that we take staff recommendation for reorganizing. I've been teaching all day.
It's hard.
And my mouth is tired. Okay, so we have 6 staffs, so let's take staff's, I move that we take staff's recommendation and change the authority staffing chart, including the elimination of the program manager positions and creation of the new positions for facilities and programs coordinator, and modifications to the job descriptions for the administrative assistant, solid waste, and the account clerk, solid waste.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to go ahead and approve the recommended reorganization. Any other questions? Okay, very good. Would you please poll the vote on this?
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Chairman Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Okay.
At the
Thank you.
risk of being inappropriate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for being patient, Mr. Ward, and staff.
We're on our way.
Okay, 5.4, discussion and possible action regarding Resolution 2015-08, a resolution of the governing...
5.3.
We missed
Oh,
that.
did I miss one? That must have been subliminal.
Are you trying to
Okay.
get out of here?
Discussion and possible action regarding rate ordinance 2015-01, establishing a rate for commercial oil pumping at the Del Norte County Transfer Station. And along with this, as I understand it, today we have this on our agenda to introduce and waive the first full reading of ordinance 2015-01, and then it goes to the Board of Supervisors and the City Council, and they approve the ordinances. They only approve the ordinance, but they do not adopt them. So they also do not introduce and waive the full readings because they're not actually adopting them as county and city ordinances. And then, does that then come back to us for final adoption? Okay, very good. Is that clear to everyone? Okay. So, Mr. Ward, would you like to say anything?
Yes, so this is a follow-on to the change order that the board has already approved for Hambro WSG to provide commercial oil pumping services at a charge of $15 per pump activity. And as it is a new service, a new rate, it is a new rate ordinance, and therefore, under our bylaws, must be approved separately by the county and the city prior to final adoption by this board. So this is the first step, and we're waiving the first reading, but it just establishes that one rate.
Okay, thank you. Any questions about this? Okay, any public comment on this matter? Having to do with commercial oil pumping? Okay, seeing none, we'll come back to the commission itself. I'd entertain a motion.
Well, I move to approve the rate ordinance 2015-01, establishing a rate of commercial oil pumping at Belmont County Transfer Station.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded to approve a rate ordinance 2015-01. Any further discussion?
I
Yes.
just have a question. Will this open up a service for national parks, Caltrans? Where are they taking their oil?
I don't know where they're currently taking their oil. They could be managing them themselves, but yes, this is a service available to anyone who has up to 55-gallon of uncontaminated used motor oil, and they're looking to recycle it. Current transportation limits are 15 gallons, so if you are hauling more than 15 gallons, CHP can pull you over and give you a ticket. But the rules are, if you're a commercial person and you have this quantity of oil, the rules are you're supposed to call to find out whether or not the facility can take it and what hours they're open, and then you can bring it. We will take it from anybody who delivers it safely and uncontaminated. That's a very important thing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, would you please poll the vote on this?
Commissioner Gastineau.
Yes.
Commissioner McClure.
Yes.
Chairman Hawley.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Now we'll move to 5.4. Discussion and possible action regarding Resolution 2015-08, a resolution of the Governing Board of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority adopting a revised Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority Code of Ethics and Conduct for Board Commissioners and members appointed to commissions and committees. Mr. Ward?
This was an item that was tabled from the last meeting. Commissioners McClure and Glore met with myself to review the current code of ethics and to make changes based largely based on the suggestions in the grand jury report. And so in your board packet, you have a clean version, but you also have a red line version clarifying exactly what got changed. So I can highlight what changes were made if you would like, or you can see that for yourselves. Would you like me to go through those?
I think it would be
Okay.
beneficial for everyone.
So things that were, of course, we already had an established ethics policy. And these are, I'm just going to highlight the changes to that established policy. So under item 1, acting in the public interest, the following sentence was added to the end of that paragraph. Commissioners are obliged not to independently discuss or explore courses of action with authority contractors that are likely to directly or indirectly undermine the viability of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority, unless such discussions have been addressed as an agendized item of discussion at a regular public authority board meeting, and such independent commissioner discussion is consistent with all prior actions of the Authority Board of Commissioners.
Okay?
That's one addition. There's another addition of, under decisions based on merit, essentially, public officials have an obligation to prepare themselves for public issues, including review of relevant staff reports and printed materials as presented. Just clearly stating the expectation that you read your board packets. Which I know is challenging at times, but we
Yes.
appreciate it. Under 5, communication, we're adding a sentence at the end of that paragraph, first paragraph, saying, meetings between authority commissioners and representatives of authority contractors are ex parte communications and discouraged unless such direction has been given by the board. Any such meetings should be disclosed to the other commissioners at the start of the next regular authority meeting. So this is new. This means that if any of the commissioners have a communication, any kind, with any of the authority contractors, then you're obliged at the beginning of the next authority meeting to follow, say, I had an ex parte communication with this contractor and we discussed this item. It's not a big obligation, but it is an expectation of deliberating matters in public for the public interest, and if there are private conversations, that you disclose those.
You know, the state on ex parte asked that if you are outside of 7 days before the meeting, that you actually submit it in writing, because then the record, it's there even prior to the meeting, so it doesn't get lost. Because sometimes if somebody, you know, if I had a meeting tomorrow with someone and I don't get that ex parte in, by the time the meeting arrives, that may have been history to me, but I don't know if we want to take it that far at this point. But the state also has really nice forms for ex parte communication that you can do that are just a breeze to work through, if we want to just have those available for commissioners.
I could circulate those, and certainly if I received any written ex parte communications, I could include those in the agenda packet.
Exactly.
But as this is written, the only stated
Right.
expectation is the next authority board meeting, you make a verbal
Which is a
statement.
good first start, but it's just an idea that I'll get you a copy of the ex parte stuff.
No, it's assuming we didn't put anything in writing. I assume, Martha, that we would be going ahead and revealing those ex parte communications at the very beginning of the meeting, so that it wouldn't cloud any of the rest of the meeting, right? I don't know at what point
Yeah,
we
we might,
volunteer.
we might want to add a regular agenda item for commissioner reports or something at the beginning for issues like that.
Okay.
It's nothing we take action on, but just a space for people to communicate stuff like that.
On commissions and boards that I've sat on that require the ex parte, it's usually done, the staff person introduces the subject of the next item, and then the chair says, are there any ex partes to report? And it's just done,
At the time of that
because sometimes
item.
you have several. You may
But
have
the I
one
guess
we
the
would,
thing is
but-
that some of these contacts might not have anything to do with any of the subjects on the agenda, but under the revisions, they would still be
Would still
required
need
to
to be
be
reported.
reported.
Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Moving on. So additional changes or additions under confidential information, it's specified that information that is not generally available to the public, including discussions held during closed sessions, must remain confidential and be used only for the purposes for which it was divulged. So that clarifies that closed sessions are closed sessions. Added to the section 17 on compliance and enforcement. This was the area specifically that the grand jury suggested be changed because it put the director in the awkward position of potentially enforcing the ethics policy against commissioners. But it currently reads, complaints alleging a violation of this code of conduct by an authority employee or voluntary appointee who is not a commissioner, namely task force members, should be directed to the authority's director. Upon receipt of a complaint, the authority's director and its general legal counsel shall together determine a course of action. The authority's director and its general legal counsel shall, should they fail to resolve the complaint or should the complaint be of a serious nature, consult with the chair, unless the chair is not available, in which event they shall consult with the vice chair or other commissioner in order of seniority as is appropriate under the circumstances, in order to determine an appropriate course of action. The following is added. Complaints alleging a violation of this code of conduct by an authority commissioner should be directed to the authority chair or vice chair if the chair is the subject of the complaint.
Okay.
So that changes that, and those are the only changes that are recommended. Yes, there are some things that are stricken, and mostly they were in the following paragraphs, following what I just read, and they had to do with how the previous code of ethics was to be enforced.
Okay. Any questions about these changes? Okay, is there any public comment on these changes that are being proposed? Yes.
Elizabeth Henry County. I have a question. I guess I assume reading the code that it was implied that the Del Norte Solid Waste Task Force is one of those appointed committees that would have been covered. It's just that they never were given the code of ethics to review and to sign. So essentially, they were always a part, in a way, except it was never officially carried out. Okay, because I just want to make sure that from now on, that with the code, the way it is, that will happen, so we don't run into the same problems.
In fact, you'll find later on the agenda, Mr. Ward addresses that in his staff report. That's one of the things.
Okay, I'm sorry, I
missed.
missed that.
No, that's okay.
Didn't read the whole thing. I'll have
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're not under an ethical obligation to do so.
Yeah. But we could stretch it.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Bill Lonsdale. I live in Crescent City. 3 items relating to this item and also the subsequent one on the bylaws. I'd like to compliment Mr. Ward and whoever worked on laying this thing out for doing the line in, line out treatment. It made it an awful lot easier to check the changes, and I appreciate that. Second, these 2 actions that you're going to take are going to set the tone for the board and for the authority for hopefully some time to come. And the question naturally will occur, should this be an action by the whole board rather than a minimum quorum? And I think I have no quarrel with what's going on, but I think that it would be important to establish on the record that the action that you take today is sufficient in terms of the number of board members involved. And finally, we have rules of order as well, and I think a lot of the motivation behind these 2 measures comes from the failure of the rules of order to cover the terrible situation of the last several years. But I do think it's important that there be some consistency between your rules of order and your code of ethics and your bylaws. And I just wonder if that has been tested and if there are any areas of conflict. And in case of such conflict, what prevails, the rules of order or these 2 things? Thank you very much.
Good questions, thank you. I just want to jump in and kind of remind everyone that Dr. Glore was a part of the committee that drafted these, so she's well aware of it, the content. But thank you, Mr. Lonsdale. Any other, yes, sir.
Joel Wallen with Hamburg WSG, also a task force member. Though I think all these rules are great and they need to be in place, one of the things we may have forgotten is that we've asked folks from the industry to be a part of the task force. So in any way where those rules can, conflict with a person from a contractor being on the task force. So just wanted to bring that up.
That's a very good point, thank you.
You'd have to tell us if you talk to yourself.
Yeah, don't look in the mirror and talk. Thank you.
Right.
Because they're at the task force as a task force member, not as the contractor, right?
Right, so I guess the concern would be if there was going to be an obligation for a contractor's representative on the solid waste task force to disclose conversations that they had with maybe another contractor or something. I don't see it as an issue with the task force as much as the board, because the task force role is really, the majority is to make, right, advisory, make recommendations, and some of the contractors obviously do have to speak to each other in the normal course of their business. So, that's clearly not prohibited, but it does raise an interesting point.
But we're not asking the contractor if they wouldn't have to ever do an ex parte if Pembroke and ecology were
I don't see the ex parte as being an active part of the task force activity, because the task force is never making decisions that have financial repercussions directly. They would be making advisory decisions to this agency.
Good. Well, interesting public comments. Did you have something more?
I would just add that if, if I was asked to sign something as the way it's stated now, that seems like that would be some kind of a conflict that I may, that wouldn't, just doesn't jive, I don't think.
Oh, can you clarify, what conflict do you see?
I guess, like with the code of conduct, if we were to go to the task force and ask the members to sign that code of conduct, without reading it over very carefully, it just seems like there would be some issues there where it just wouldn't jive with, a member of the contractor being on the task force. I'm not sure what it is. I haven't read it close enough to know. It just seems like it wouldn't be something I'd want to sign, I guess.
Well, just for the board's clarification, the task force under law is an advisory body that's established to review the regional agency integrated waste management plan and our compliance along with that. So just as a turn of phrase, they're kind of like the alpha recyclers. They're the ones who are trying to make recycling work in our community. That's kind of their role, to make sure that we're following through on our programs are being implemented. If there's a potential conflict between the programs, working out those. That's the role of the task force. And specifically under law, the contract folks who have professional active experience are exactly the sorts of people who should be sitting on the task force, because we're talking nuts and bolts kinds of issues. So we want to, if they're interested in serving on the task force, we want to make sure they are welcome to a seat at the table.
If I may, I just pulled this up and might warrant closer examination, but under 5 communication, where it talks about ex parte communications, it is specific to authority commissioners.
But isn't that part of the problem that we were trying to get, is that we had a task force person that actually went to a contractor to talk about how we could alter the contract?
Although I think that was part of a public meeting. I don't think it was ex parte.
I thought it was a private meeting between the former director and I wasn't here, so I'm just...
Yeah, well, I wasn't there either, but I thought part of the discussion that came up last time when we were going over the grand jury response, and maybe we didn't get deep enough into it because it didn't matter, because the code of ethics didn't apply, so it didn't necessarily matter as to exactly what happened, but I do believe it was presented to be maybe a subcommittee or something when there were minutes. I'm not sure.
As far as I could tell, that was a private meeting that did not have official sanction with respect to the task force. Seemed to be just a private meeting of private individuals. But this, my read of the current draft of the ethics policy before you would not prohibit that kind of activity from future task force members. The future task force members met with authority contractors and discussed things that were antithetical to the authority's interests. That isn't prohibited by this because they don't have actual decision-making authority. So we could make that clarification, but it's actually part of the issue that Joel is raising, in that to what extent are authority contractors, if they sit on the task force, restricted by this policy.
What about a contractor exemption? I mean, they have to deal in business terms all the time, and so they can't divulge all sorts of things. But thinking about a task force member, if they're out trying to get information to help on advisory, they need to go talk to the contractors, maybe one by one, and bring that back.
Well,
to the
my
task force.
concern about that is I do not want to have the task force get the impression that they are managing any aspect of the authority's administration, whether it's budget, personnel. They are advisory bodies to this board. It's not really, while I appreciate their potential interest and investigation as to options, that's really what it would be. It would be a general, what are our options kind of discussion, rather than, we're going to do this.
Well, and I think the intent of the task force is to take direction from this board of here's what we would like you to look at mattresses and help us figure out what would be the best mattress and another textile or recycling or something. But it needs to be direction from the board, not just kind of a free-for-all. And I don't know if we can have that, this may trigger language into the task force, but maybe we need to look at the language of the task force to make sure that they are operating with the authorities as a privilege of the authority, but they are to follow, they just can't pick subject matter and say, you know, we're going to go do tree recycling tomorrow, and or you know what I'm trying to get to?
So based on this discussion, though, and where it's at and what we're doing, it seems to me one course of action the board could take is to adopt this policy as presented, and then suggest that I present this policy for the consideration by the task force, and the task force read and review and comment on it, and then we meet again with the bylaws and ethics committee to consider those, and then bring it back to the board if there's any recommended changes based on that.
That would work. And I also think that there's a possibility, and tell me if I'm wrong on this one, that we could actually have the contractors listed as ex officios on the task force.
That was going to be my suggestion, too.
And then they can still vote, but they're identified as an ex officio, so they would be able to still do their business. They would be a representative of a business, but not.
Okay.
I don't know if that's the right term, ex officio, but that's.
I think the ex officios can't vote. They sit on the board without a vote.
That may follow, but that may be enough.
But as, just to be clear, as written, the ex parte communication stuff only
Only
applies to
commissioners.
commissioners.
Okay, we have more public comment.
This is a good discussion.
Yeah, it is a very good discussion.
Wes White with Hambro WSG. Just a couple things to think about. I would suggest as a possibility you think about excluding the task force from this, because the task force has no authority, as Ted pointed out, to make any decisions. It only makes recommendations. Number two, this is all state mandated what this task force jobs are, so it's going to create a real conflict for a contractor to be in there and discussing without some kind of exclusion from them. So I'm going to recommend that Joel withdraw from the task force, and that's a shame because he's got a lot of experience. There's a lot of experience with Jordan, myself, Recology, whoever, so anyway, something to think about.
Thank you. I know that, I don't think any of us anticipated this, so.
Well,
Yeah, yes. I'm sorry, there's somebody else. Hi.
Paula Ivy County. I just have a question. Can a task force member still simultaneously be on the board as a commissioner?
At this time, yes.
At this time, is there, because I see that as a real conflict of interest from past experiences. So is that even something up for discussion at this time?
We're going to be looking at, I think, at a later time, but something that we have discussed is it is not particularly unusual. This exists in other areas of government. And Ms. McClure, you could probably
right,
cite some.
like for instance, I sit on the senior center board.
As do I.
And the county gives money to the senior center board. Is that a conflict? And it's been determined that those aren't conflicts.
If you have a task force member then that's meeting with, say, a vendor, a contractor, as a task force member, but then coming on the board and having, do they have to report an ex parte meeting then?
If they're a board.
They probably should,
Okay.
yes.
Because it kind of blurs the lines a little bit because there was a push for ordinances and the information presented before the board was incorrect by a task force member, also a commissioner. So that's just.
Point. Thank you.
I would, as much as I don't honor having to have another meeting, but I think that possibly our code of ethics is not right in relationship to how it's going to cover the task force and how it's going to cover contractors. And we probably need to grapple with that. So I would suggest that we table this in order to get it right, that we don't adopt something today and then try to unravel the problems in a month.
Okay.
That work?
I
Yeah,
wouldn't have any trouble
the
with that.
other real possibility is to come up with a separate code of ethics that
And
was
that
more
indeed-
tailored to that role.
And indeed, we may do that, because truthfully, when we did this, I didn't anticipate an issue with the members of the task force not being able to feel free to communicate. So that, I think, is important.
And the task force currently has a code of conduct, but it's like 10 bullet points. It's really short. But
And they're on hiatus right now anyway, so.
That's true. So
Might I suggest, can we use the same committee?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I just committed Dr. Gore.
I thought you did. I heard that. It was, again, subliminal.
If she's willing.
I'm sure she would be. Any problems with, so we'll go ahead and table this item, and hopefully we'll have something that we can all agree with next meeting.
That'll be stronger.
okay.
Good, thank you, and thank you for your public comments. I think we avoided some issues thereby, so thanks again. So, let's go ahead and move on to the bylaws. And this is discussion and possible action regarding Resolution 2015-09, a resolution of the Governing Board of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority adopting first amended bylaws.
So there are a number of aspects of the bylaws that need revision, not the least of which including, say, the address of the agency. It was pretty old, and so they're in your board packet. Not only you have the proposed clean version of the bylaws, you also have a version that has highlights and of changes that are made, and the original version, which I did not have in a electronic form. So just going through the changes that are made, we add the correct address of the agency. Under officers, there was under the previous version, there was a description of the executive committee that would serve when there was no solid waste manager position. That was carried over from when the first bylaws were adopted before there was a solid waste authority manager. Under treasurer controller, we clarified that if the authority establishes its own financial accounts separated from both the County of Del Norte and the City of Crescent City, the treasurer controller shall file an official bond in the amount determined by the governing board and thereafter be responsible as the depository and have custody of all money of the authority from whatever source. This is actually a section that's required under law, but as the authority's accounts are managed through the county auditor's office, there's really no need for the treasurer controller to have a separate bond or to be even in a position where he might be the person responsible for all of the money. So it's sort of held out there. If we have to go there, then we have the rules to follow. Under secretary, the prior version had the secretary furnish a bond and have responsibility for control of all authority properties, documents, and records. Again, that was prior to actually having employees and an agency, and there's no need to have the secretary responsible for all of the authority's property. There is an addition of a section regarding the clerk, which was not previously described, and it says as follows: the clerk of the authority shall provide services as recording secretary for authority meetings, keeping and filing records of authority meetings, proceedings, and actions. The clerk shall affix the authority seal to all resolutions and ordinances, instruments, and contracts authorized to be executed for and on behalf of the authority and appropriately adopted by the authority board. The clerk is a non-voting office and may be staffed by an appropriately trained authority employee. Catherine Brewer, not stated in there. In the event of a vacancy in the clerk position, the authority director may procure on the authority's behalf necessary secretarial support for recording minutes at authority meetings until a clerk is appointed. So it gives provisions, so if the clerk's not there, we know what we can do. There is clarification that the authority director is authorized to make expenditures of up to $5,000. that both voting and non-voting commissioners shall serve without compensation, according to changes to the bylaws that were adopted previously. The annual meeting is clarified as the first meeting of the new fiscal year, which starts in July, attended by all commissioners appointed by charter members. That the authority's regular meeting shall be held at the time, date, and location as set by the governing board in a duly adopted resolution. So previously, whenever we changed the date and time of the meeting, we had to change the bylaws. This just clarifies whatever's in the most recent resolution, that's when and where we meet. Slightly changed the order of business to be consistent with how the authority agendas are prepared. That all resolutions shall be in writing, and the authority clerk will maintain a binder of adopted resolutions for reference as needed. The authority clerk will also maintain separate binders of adopted authority ordinances and minutes. We already have those established. Any ordinance of the governing board must be approved by a majority vote of both the city council and the board of supervisors before the ordinance may be adopted by the authority governing board. And that's consistent with the JPA agreement. And those are the changes. So staff recommendation is that the board adopt resolution 2015-09, adopting the first amended bylaws.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Ward? I have one quick one. Under quorum, section 3.4, I think it's the last sentence where it says, when a quorum is in attendance, action may be taken by a majority vote of the members of the governing board present, provided there is at least one vote on the prevailing side from each of the charter members, except in cases where more than a majority vote is required by law or prior agreement. I certainly understand the law, but I've never seen the language of there being a prior agreement.
That was specified because the director's contract has a few provisions that are specify the votes required that are a 4/5 vote instead of a simple majority.
That's the example. Okay, thank you. Okay, any other? Okay, any public comment on the change in the bylaws, proposed changes in our bylaws? Okay, not as exciting as the Code of Ethics, apparently. So we'll go ahead and bring this back to the commission. What's your pleasure?
Let me get to the top. I move that we approve the first amended bylaws of the Del Norte Solid Waste Oh, not that one. I move that we approve the bylaws as suggested by staff.
And resolution 2015-09.
Yes, thank you. And resolution 2015-09.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I was too deep into the reading.
I understand. Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve resolution 2015-09 regarding our first amended bylaws. Any other discussion? Okay.
I do. I think it was your idea about how we could address the chair and how we did it with the fiscal year as opposed to the new year, because all of a sudden you could have a change in the board, and this way people would have a bit of a history. And so I thought that was a great idea and just wanted to kind of call that out as a good job.
Okay. Yeah, kind of makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm. It makes great sense.
Okay, thank you. So would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Gastineau.
Yes.
Commissioner McClure.
Yes.
Chairman Hawley.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So, moving on to directors and treasurers reports. Director's report, Mr. Ward.
Yes. So, starting at the beginning of October, the outlying sites, meaning the Klamath and Gasky transfer stations, will fall to the winter schedule, which means they're open one fewer days each week. Klamath transfer station will be open Sunday and Wednesdays from 10 to 4, and Gasky will be open only on Saturdays from 10 to 4. That's starting in October. One of the things that I've concluded, I started meeting with Bonnie Langley of Lawrence & Associates regarding the environmental review at the landfill. I think we've kicked that off well, and they are working on the GeoTracker online reporting system. As I started to investigate our options regarding the repair of the transfer station floor, my research indicates that I really should plan to schedule 2 or 3 trips to other facilities that have conducted such repairs. my reasons for that include the magnitude of this expense and the reports from several contractors with the experience that the contractor doing this work is especially critical to the longevity of the finished product. So this is the top ceiling of the concrete floor, and you need to have a really good bond to the lower lying concrete and the seal on top. And if those delaminate, then it's much less useful. And also an expensive lesson. So consequently, there aren't very many situations where it seems that we should have a construction project that maybe shouldn't go to the lowest bidder. And so when we have a big construction project like this that maybe looks like it shouldn't go to the lowest bidder, I want to understand what are our parameters. How are we going to specify this so that we are spending the authority's resources prudently and make sure that we get as long a lasting repair as we can put into place. I'm aware that Humboldt County has done a similar kind of repair job, and there's a facility in Reading. So those are the two that I'm thinking of visiting. But bottom line is that I'm thinking that I want to do those site visits and come back with that information before making a recommendation to go out to bid for this job and specifying exactly how we're going to do that. So bottom line, more research I think is required on that. Attached to this director's report are 3 regular reports that we submit, including the Crescent City Landfill semi-annual report to the Regional Water Quality Control Board. We do this twice a year, and it gives a good summary about what's going on at the landfill in terms of water quality monitoring. There's also the 2014 annual report to Cal Recycle. That electronic report was due on August 3rd, but was submitted on the 24th of August. Similarly, the semi-annual report was also late, just more of a
Won't
theme.
be next year.
Next year, we're planning on being on time. Significantly, this annual report to Cal Recycle is the first report since 2005 where the authority has had less than the required 15 years of disposal capacity secured. So staff will be working with Hambro WSG and the Dry Creek landfill in the coming months to address this issue with the intent that the additional disposal capacity will be secured before the next annual report is due in August 2016. Also, that annual report, it's a little confusing because when the agency was first established, what was often talked about was diversion from landfill. So that would mean all the activities that you do to manage materials without landfilling them. So that could include composting, reuse, recycling, and we measured our percent diversion. And so it's still a regularly asked question. So how are you doing in terms of your diversion goal? How much are you recycling? But now we have a disposal cap, meaning that we have a maximum amount that we can dispose, and we try to stay below that by implementing recycling, reuse, and composting programs. So we are below that cap, but if one does the math, we're approximately, in 2014, we had about a 57.8% diversion rate. So still we're well above 50% and doing pretty well, but in terms of the state's overall 75% recycling goal, we have some work to do. Then finally, there's also the Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Authority report that's also attached, and that's a regular annual report. So, big event for people watching at home. I want everybody to know that the next hazardous waste collection event is scheduled for Saturday, September 26th from 9 a.m. until 2 p.m. at the Del Norte County Transfer Station. That's at 1700 State Street. Businesses with hazardous waste must first obtain an EPA ID number and call for an appointment at 800-433-5060 before this Friday. With an appointment, businesses with hazardous waste can pay for their hazardous waste disposal needs by appointment on Friday, September 25th. We always have a few commercial businesses or Oregon residents who try to bring their hazardous waste to our Del Norte Household Hazardous Waste Collection event, but we have to turn them away. This event costs the authority, on average, over $150 per vehicle. So it's an expensive event. I have already sent email reminders to city, county, and tribal department heads and prepared and placed ads in the Del Norte Triplicate and on radio stations KCRE, KPOD, and KFUG. Finally, I want to remind people that that the hazardous materials that we accept every day for free at the transfer station include used motor oil and oil filters, antifreeze, car batteries, televisions and computer monitors, household fluorescent tubes, needles and sharps in FDA-approved sharps containers, non-aerosol paints, stains, and lacquers, and all household batteries with one end taped. So if those are the hazardous materials you have, no need for you to make a special trip. We accept those every day at the Delaware County Transfer Station. So major activities coming up. Hopefully we will be recruiting and going through the hiring process for the Programs and Facilities Coordinator's position. And I'll be working with the Ethics and Bylaws Committee to review the ethics policy. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I just have a personal one. So I have this great collection since I replaced all of my compact fluorescents with LEDs. I just have this big pile, and I can only take in 9 of them every 30 days.
That's correct.
So at the hazardous waste roundup, I can't bring in any more.
Nope. You would be charged for them.
You're killing me here, Ted.
As you can understand, there are many people who are eager to try to find a way to recycle things for free as opposed to the way that they're charged. But some of those folks run things like hotels. And when they bring in 50 fluorescent tubes from their shop, we have to have some ability to recover those costs. Plus, when we first opened up the transfer station, the idea was that the most common household hazardous waste would be recycled every day for free. So we included household fluorescent tubes. Well, after the transfer station opened, all fluorescent tubes were banned from mixed waste disposal. And so it's unreasonable to expect that Hambro will accept all fluorescent tubes from all comers in all quantities because they're our contractor. We all suffer if they're not paying their bills. So there needs to be a provision that commercial fluorescent tubes and compact fluorescent bulbs are accepted for a fee. Also, if they're brought from Oregon, they're accepted for a fee.
What is that fee?
Kathy.
Refer.
I just wanted to mention that residential customers can also bring in more than 9, but you have to pay for them also.
Well, what is that? I gotta get them out of my house.
It varies according to the size of the bulb.
Okay.
The compact fluorescents are all a standard price, but I'd have to look it up. I don't have it on the top of my head.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. You may have a friendly neighbor that could help.
Because he goes every 2 weeks.
That's right. And I don't have any. Yeah, here we go again. We'll go forward with the directors and treasurers reports, but I wanted to say that we will have a public comment, but we're going to do public comment on all of these reports at one time, so at the end, okay? So the treasurer controller report for 2015, July?
Yep. So bottom line, this isn't a final July because this is, July, as of July 31, the authority had $828,507.92 in the bank. Of course, we had $198,000 still set aside as our last month's payment. Moving through, the claims approved by director, again, as always, the largest payment is to Hambro WSG for the fine services they provide at the transfer station. You can see the $5,100 that was for oil recycling equipment that we discussed at the last meeting. We had the payment of the RCRC ESJPA dues. Those are the big ticket items. Moving on, the financial reports are all fairly standard, but the summary is that looking at our revenues compared to projections for the authority revenue from the transfer station, we're 11% ahead of budget, and we received over $20,600 ahead of where we would expect ourselves to be on a standard month. And we're $3,292 ahead of projections on the franchise fees. So revenues are ahead of projections for the first 2 months of the fiscal year.
Good to hear. Thank you. I think Mr. Gastineau has a question?
Yeah, I just didn't see the accounts receivable
The
journal
aging
in here.
The aging summary?
I don't think he got it, at least my
I did not
electronic.
get into the packet, but that is no fault of Lisa Babcock, 'cause I'm sure I have it. I just neglected to put in the packet. I apologize for that.
But it's been looking good over the last couple of months.
And it's continuing to look good. She's done good work bringing our accounts receivable down, and most all of our accounts are up to date. I would be happy to email that if you are interested.
Please do.
Okay.
Thank you. Time for public comment on any of the director's report, treasurer report, claims, monthly cash or earned revenue comparisons. Any public comment? Okay, very good. Well, we've come to the end of our agenda today. I thank you all for being here, and the next meeting of the Solid Waste Management Authority is scheduled for October 20, 2015 at 3:30. So, we'll see you then. Thank you for coming. Thanks.